Good evening, everyone, and I would like to welcome you and call to order the meeting of the Sustainability Commission of June 20th, 2023. And Director McCoy, can we have the roll call, please?
We can have the roll call. So I will start with Commissioner Baker.
Here.
Commissioner Barrett.
Present.
Interim Chair Friedman.
Yes, present.
Oh, sorry, I should have said Interim Vice Chair Baker. My apologies. I will we also we have Commissioner Torrens is absent today. And then we have our new commissioners, Commissioner Grubel.
Here.
And Commissioner Rotner.
Here.
Okay, and that's our roll call.
Okay, and have the new commissioners been sworn in? So they're fully appointed as a quorum.
The two commissioners who are present today have been sworn in. We have one additional appointed commissioner who has not been sworn in yet, and she will join us for the July meeting.
Okay, great. That's just a question for any votes that we might need to take, which we probably won't have. But anyway, I just want to clear that. Okay. Acceptance of the agenda. We do have one modification of the agenda is no minutes. We're LP and been exceedingly busy, and we were just at a conference last week in Santa Rosa that I'll be speaking about, and so I'd like to remove that item from the agenda. Any other changes to the agenda? Okay, if there are no other changes, then let's consider that the agenda is accepted. Welcome and introductions. Obviously, we will have our new commissioners introduce themselves a little bit later in the agenda. LP, any other welcome and introductions beyond that?
Well, I guess we do have Harry Barrett from the Palm Springs Airport, who will be our guest speaker today. So Harry, I guess I'll let you introduce yourself when we, after our public comment, I'll hand it over to you to do that.
Okay. All right, thank you. So we'll now move to public comment. I'm not sure, do we have any members of the public? Former Chair Clark, so I will officially go through the motion then. This is the time for members of the public to address the Sustainability Commission on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission. The Commission values your comments, but pursuant to the Brown Act, cannot take action on items not listed on the posted agenda. 3 minutes are assigned to each speaker. Do we have any members of the public who wish to speak? Okay, hearing no public comment, then I think then we can move to our guest presentation, and I would love to welcome Harry Barrett, and the director of Palm Springs International Airport, the airport we all know and love, and looking forward to going through there, being one of your passengers Thursday evening.
Well, I don't know about love it there, Commissioner, but
okay. Well, love it compared with Newark.
Oh, true. Okay, you got.
I hope you like it a lot. So thank you for having me. I am Harry Barrett. I am the aviation director for the city of Palm Springs. I was letting LP know a little bit earlier that I did have slides that I was going to show tonight, but I've been locked out of my computer all day and just got into it about 5 minutes ago. So unfortunately, such is life. So I'm going to wing it today. But I understand there's some interest in what the airport is doing with our master planning process and what we're looking at going into the future, particularly for us. That's 20 years. That's generally a planning cycle for us. However, to get to that, I'm going to kind of lay the foundation for what we're actually doing now and some of the work that's happening behind the scenes at Palm Springs. So just for the commission's awareness and education, I am probably the second largest department in the city of Palm Springs. I have the largest budget of all the departments in the city, certainly. We don't take any tax revenues. We're generally grant funded for the most part, or we make our money off the airlines and the tenants that serve the airport. And all of our airport revenues are generated by the users, none from the tax base. Up until recently, I've had a staff of about 48 people here. that went up. The FTE count, not necessarily the bodies, went up this past year to 68 folks. We're looking at hiring another 49 positions for the airport. So we're essentially doubling our staff over the next 2 years. And a lot of that is due to the growth that we're experiencing here. So I'm sure you've read in the news or heard, on TV that we've been breaking records month over month for the last couple of years, even the latter half of the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic. So we did 3 million passengers in the calendar year of 2022. That is a record for Palm Springs in general. We've never hit that number. And we're anticipated to grow at a rate of about 6 to 8% over the next 15 to 20 years or so. So there's high demand for travel, a lot of airline activity. The airlines are doing really creative things on their side of the house. And what that translates into is an airport right now that's designed for 1 million annual passengers, that's handling 3 million annual passengers, and has to plan for about 6 million annual passengers a year over the next 15 to 20 years. So that's kind of what my staff really is dealing with right now, is not only playing catch up, but looking forward and figuring out how we're going to operate in this region 20 years into the future. And we're doing that within the context of managing things like fuel cost and inflationary forces, at least for the immediate future. Passenger demand, the airline industry as a whole has pilot shortages. So we're seeing changes in aircraft and the type of aircraft that are using the facility year over year, and the political and regulatory changes that come with that. And add on to that the layer of sustainability and all things zero emissions, and then you create a rather complicated situation for airports to live in that space. We tend to generate a lot of emissions and waste and things just because we have so many people come through the facility. So part of our strategy here is figuring out how we're going to mitigate some of those things over time, starting with some of the things that we're doing today in terms of the planning process. So that's where we are as an organization. Right now, my staff is focused on delivering a number of different initiatives that feed into kind of the sustainability space. And that's ease of access for the airport. We want the airport to certainly be an economic driver for the region. Innovative organizations, so leveraging more technology and more futuristic goals versus what we're doing today. Competitive access, and then community education, which all feed into that sustainable PSP. And we're not only looking at sustainability through the lens of emissions or through waste or things that you would typically see, but we're also looking at financial sustainability and how over the long term we're able to keep the airport thriving for the community as a whole. So that's kind of where we are right now as an organization. All of my managers and directors are focused on some level on that goal. Now, as that relates to the master planning process that we're currently going through, so we initiated a 30-month master plan process in February of this year. And the aim of that process really was to catch up on some of our capital needs. We understood that we were at an infrastructure deficit. We understood that the facility wasn't able to handle the capacity of not only the aircraft, but the number of passengers coming through the facility itself. We have some parking and ground transportation challenges and things of that nature. So we embarked upon a 30-month master planning process to correct some of those issues. However, what we included in the scope of that process was that it needed to be a sustainable master plan. The idea being is as we start to touch some of these areas of the airport that are critical, that we're starting to include some of our sustainability goals. So for example, capturing electrification when it comes to public parking and how we leverage solar and electrification to drive some of our sustainability goals there. Another example of that would be we're changing over our concessions program. And as we start to roll into a new concessions program with food and beverage and retail, how we handle some of those solid waste issues and separation of compostables from the regular trash that tends to go to the landfills, things of that nature. Also, when it comes to design of the facility itself, using LEED architecture infrastructure to develop the facility and figuring out how we do that, not only with the materials that we're using, but also in the delivery of those materials. So how we get material A from point A to point Z in the most sustainable way possible. So we're starting to look at that holistically here in the airport. Now, an airport tends to run like a city. So there's a lot there to unpack and a lot there for us to try and harness all at once. And there's a lot to do on a very small staff. So part of what we've been doing and working with LP on the last couple of weeks, LP sits on the working group for the master plan. But part of that was identifying those areas that are most achievable and critical for the airport, and figuring out how to focus on those 4 or 5 key elements in the master planning process, and how we can incorporate that over time, over the next 20 years, while also dealing with some of the regulatory changes that are coming through and some of the social issues as well affiliated with that. So as I mentioned, 30-month master planning process. Right now, we've inventoried the conditions, the current conditions on the airport. We've completed an aeronautical forecast and identified how much growth we're going to see and how much we need to plan for that. And the next steps to that process are identifying the alternatives for the airport. So what that looks like in practice in terms of building out the facility, the geometry, the land use, how that impacts the neighborhoods around us, and what ultimate sustainability goals we need to factor into that entire planning process. So that's a very high level overview for what we're doing. I hope, that provided you with some insight, but I'm certainly happy to have a discussion about what that looks like and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Director Barrett. Commissioners, questions? And I have some as well at the end, but let some of the other commissioners do that. Interim Vice Chair Baker.
Hi, yes. I just had 2 questions on transportation. One, there still seems to be a lot of confusion for people looking for ride shares when they arrive to our airport. I've seen them standing in the taxi line. I would say, oh no, you've got to walk way down over there in the middle of nowhere to find your Uber. The second is there's no public transportation. The bus stop is across the street on El Cielo rather than making a loop through the airport, although I don't know how many people would actually avail themselves to public transportation, but it doesn't seem like it would be a huge stretch to get the Sun bus line to at least go through the loop, since it's literally just outside the property.
I can address both of those for you. So on the first point with the rideshare, we see a lot of that too. And really the ride shares and the taxis, honestly, their current operation and their location were basically a Band-Aid fix to an airport that at the time was growing pretty quickly. And we were trying to figure out how to make that work in the space that we had. One of the at least short-term solutions to that is to reimagine how we deal with our public parking here. And so what we're currently working on is taking lot A, which is directly across from our baggage claim, abandoning that lot for public parking and using that space for TNCs, Uber and Lyft, taxis, and commercial vehicles.
Great.
That would then open up an economy lot for us on the south end of the airport, which would allow us to charge differential
cell
rates.
phone lot, that one over there.
Exactly right. So that would take a lot of that traffic off the access roads essentially and put that in a parking lot. As to the second point with regard to public transportation, so we've engaged with Sunline on that. And part of the challenge we're running into is that for the Sunline bus to use the airport road and to come in and drop people off and take people up, it impacts their service level capabilities. So that's what they've communicated to us. We're trying to work through that process now to figure out how to reduce their dwell times and things of that nature, so that we can make that more efficient for them. So we're looking at that as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Barrett?
My main question is sort of generic, which would be one of the goals in environmentally preferable purchasing is to work with local contractors. Now, we're a small city where we don't have contractors that are used to working with an institution the size of the airport. How is your success in working with local contractors?
It's hit or miss, and it really depends on the service or product that we're trying to procure. So for example, when it comes to things like janitorial supplies, that's a little easier for us than if we were procuring something like paint for our runways and taxiways. So for that, last year we were struggling with a lot of other airports trying to figure out where to procure paint. And we had to source it from Texas, and that was not without its challenges as well. So to your point, yeah, there are some challenges, and specifically in an airport environment where it's very a niche feel. There are some challenges with procuring things in the airport environment.
Is it possible to work with local suppliers to help them become better suited to working with the airport?
It is, and part of that is an education message. So what we've figured out over the last year and a half is that a lot of the local suppliers either don't know the airport exists, which is surprising, or don't know that they can work with the airport on some of these things. And so we are looking at how to better educate the community and the region about what the opportunities are here, where we can partner, where it might be more beneficial for us to do other things and create synergies, and go about it that way. But that's going to take some time. That's going to take a couple of years for us to really get that message out there and make sure that people understand what the opportunities are.
Oh, good. But you're trying. So
We are trying, yes.
good. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, other our new commissioners, any specific comments, questions?
Can I answer personal question?
Sure. Yeah.
Just for the urinals, it would be really nice if you put a little shelf above the urinals so your bag doesn't have to go in a puddle of piss when you're trying to make it. There's no place to put anything down while you're at the urinals, and those floors are always disgusting. A nice little shelf above, keep an eye on your personal objects would be.
So
Again.
it's interesting you mentioned that. One of the first things, actually in my interview, when I interviewed here in person for the second time, when I came 3 years ago, and at the time, the city manager and assistant city manager asked me, you know, what do I see as challenges and problems with the airport? And restrooms were very, very high on my list. And so we're actually in the process of soliciting to redesign the restrooms, and that would be one of the things that we certainly look at.
Thank you.
That would put you way ahead of most every other airport in the country. Now, we are trying to increase rail transportation to the valley. How would the airport work with that?
We had some time ago had a strategy session with our airport commission. It was a little over a year ago now. One of the things that the airport staff proposed was a multimodal transportation facility. And the reason was twofold, right? To help energize the region in terms of bringing additional air traffic into this facility. But it also, it was to help a little bit with offsetting some of our challenges with regard to air transportation in general. So the idea was that this facility would be able to accommodate not only road transportation, buses, taxis, things of that nature, but might also create some pathway to either a shuttle to and from the airport to a rail station or a potential connection there. We didn't know what that looked like at the time. So we're still exploring that. The commission was kind of lukewarm on what that looks like, mostly because we were still in the infancy stage of trying to figure out the master planning process. But we do think there are opportunities there for the airport and the rail system to synergize.
Good. That's it for me.
Okay, Commissioner Wong?
Sorry, I have a question, Bernard here. I'm just curious in the planning for to meet the, I think you said like 6 million passengers. Is there going to be a need to increase runway, new runways, or to be able to meet that, or are they going to be able to use the same? I'm just curious about noise and land use on maintaining getting to your goals.
Yeah, so noise is going to be an issue for any airport. We are not looking right now at building a new runway. We're not looking at extending one of the runways. I will couch that in that all depends on what some of the future outcomes are for the airport. So for example, if we had an airline that decided to announce that they were going to service Palm Springs and it was an international carrier and they said, hey, we're going to bring a larger aircraft in, depending on how many times a day or how many times a year they bring that aircraft in, we might have to look at planning for a larger runway. On the airport side, we do not, under FAA regulations, have the ability to control what airline comes into the airport and who's allowed in and who operates there. We just have to accommodate for it. So if that were to happen, we would have to look at that. We are currently not looking at that.
Thanks. Just another follow-up question. I heard somewhere, and it may not be true, that there was thought or discussions about another airport further down the valley. I'm just wondering how that might impact Palm Springs and how that might affect transportation and traffic if there were to be something. And this may be way down the road, but it just kind of popped into my head. If that's being thought about.
To Thermal Airport?
Yeah, I think that might have been it, and how big it is going to be, or.
Yeah, so just for the rest of the group's awareness, apparently there have been discussions in the past and maybe even in recent history about potentially expanding Thermal Airport to enable commercial transportation. And that's possible. They've got the land and the runway space for it. If that were to happen, the way I envision Palm Springs and Thermal working together would probably be more like a regional airport system, a regional airport authority. The idea being to balance some of the use between both airports so that not one airport is getting a majority of the heavy traffic that causes noise issues or emissions issues or things like that. That said, with Thermal and their situation, that requires a lot of not only FAA approvals, but also airlines who are interested to service that facility to make that happen.
Great, thanks.
I thought I had ended, but Bernard's question brought up one other thing, which I don't think you can address at all, which is the issue of the noise from the military jets. That comes up often.
Comes up here often too. So the short answer to that, I don't know what your question was, but I suspect I know where it was going.
There's no question to it.
Yeah, the short answer to that is there is very, very little that I can do with military noise, with aircraft noise in general, certainly, but definitely with military noise. We have to make the airport available to government aircraft at all times. So we work with the base commanders, we work with the military, but if they opt to use the airport, there's not a lot that I can do about it.
We'll repeat that next time the question comes up in other meetings.
Very well, I appreciate it.
Okay.
Commissioner Mallegrubel, any questions? Okay, fine. I have few, one of them is related also to transportation. And as LP knows, it came up to at least tangentially at the last council meeting, we were talking about the city's electric fleet. And that was from Mayor Pro Tem Bernstein, is what is the airport doing to facilitate and encourage the rental car companies to have substantial fleets of electric vehicles. Obviously, the choice of vehicles is theirs, but the infrastructure, the ability to have the EV chargers would be a city decision, because that city would be largely city infrastructure. So can you address that? Because I believe that's also a big issue. We want to encourage people to, if they are going to rent a car, to be using electric vehicles. And of course, they're mandated in the state in the next 10 years.
That's absolutely right. So two things on that one. So the first is the rental car companies have kind of been on the forefront of this initiative to convert their fleets to all electric or at least hybrid electric vehicles. And so we've been working with the 3 rental car companies that service this airport on that. Part of the challenge being some of our capital infrastructure, which we're identifying funds for and working with them to identify funds to do some of their own improvements. And then part of that are related to some of the capacity challenges that we're having. So when I came into this job 3 years ago, the airport was actually pretty close to turning dirt on a new consolidated rental car facility, which would have basically taken the current space for the rental car companies and moved it either offsite or to another location on the airport. And that would have been an opportunity to capture more electrification there. That plan has since been paused, not necessarily canceled or stalled, but paused a little bit while we explore what the entire airport needs to do in terms of geometry and things of that nature. But with that said, part of our goal is any new development on the airport, both on the airport staff side as well as on the car rental company side, would facilitate the addition of electrification. We're also doing that in the public parking areas for us. So this summer, we're looking at installing 40 EV chargers, level 2 EV chargers in the public parking arena to help facilitate that process as well.
All right, thank you. All right, a few other questions. Don't want to dominate it. About maybe 2-3 years ago, we worked very closely. The commission worked very closely with the Sustainability Commission, Airport Commission, worked very closely and have this wonderful demonstration garden that I always enjoy visiting before I get in the taxi or Uber. So that is great. There were, if you recall, some designs about replacing other areas, turf areas, in particular, the sort of perimeter along Ramon, around the east corner, far east corner by Gene Autry, and also the essentially golf course worthy grass along El Cielo. And I realize there are some budget challenges because that also would be considered a capital improvement. But are there any plans to sort of move forward as we deal with restrictions on watering?
There are, and we are aware of those plans. So part of the challenge we had historically was that, interestingly enough, our airlines were not supportive of those types of initiatives in the airport space. And we have to use their revenues to make things happen on the airport. That was under our old airport use and lease agreement with the airlines. We've since negotiated a new one. And in the new agreement, we were able to get some concessions out of the airlines. And part of that was funding for some of those type of initiatives that included landscape conversion and things of that nature. So we have budgeted for that for the 2024 and 25 fiscal years. And we fully intend on working with the city on figuring out how we're going to make that work.
Okay, that's great news, because that's one of the comments that many tourists would say is that, why do you guys supposed to have a drought? Why do you have such lush grass on in your airport then? And then one final comment that you briefly touched on, and that's solar. Obviously, there are challenges, particularly with the Class 1 Donald Wexler Airport, but are there any plans for any form of, solar carports, either in the main parking lot or potentially, in the annex, where essentially, and maybe you can pair them with EV chargers as well, that you would generate some electricity, and potentially use that. There is an airport program, FAA program, that you probably heard of, called Valley, that I looked at quite a few years ago, but I didn't have the bandwidth to investigate that. But I know several airports have gotten FAA funds for solar installations.
Yes, so we are also looking at that. In fact, we've had very recent conversations, as recent as last week, about that very thing, and solar installations in our public parking areas. The Vail grant we did apply for last year, and that included solar installation. The challenge was, not even the challenge, it was our mistake. We got our application in 2 hours too late for the FAA. So they cut the deadline at 5 p.m. Eastern time, and that was it. We missed that deadline. So we're going to try again this year on that. But we definitely have those in our plans as well.
Okay, thank you, because that's something that I had been looking at for solar generation and offsetting some of the substantial use of the airport then. And then one final, and forgive me, as LP knows, I'm also a program manager for Desert Community Energy. So is the city using the renewable energy, the carbon-free program from Desert Community Energy, as far as you know?
We are not on the airport side, no.
Okay. LP, you might want to look at that, because I believe that's a requirement under the environmentally preferred purchasing policy, that the city facilities all use 100% carbon-free power.
Yeah, it's something I know I talked with Jeremy about on the concession side. So Harry, I'll follow back up with Jeremy, because I think they were open to it and we were looking to see how we can make those account switches.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, all right, that's fine, because that is a requirement. I think the assumption was that the airport was using 100% carbon-free energy. So LP, keep me posted on that, because obviously that's a substantial load factor. If the airport is not on DCE and becomes on DCE, we'd need to know that. But that is a requirement under the environmentally preferred purchasing policy. The city facilities use 100% carbon-free energy. That is it for me, on at least on that issue then.
I will note that I just added in the chat that, Harry, the EPP starts on July 1st.
Yeah,
We have good timing, we have time. So thanks
I will look at it.
yeah. So, I mean, it obviously applies generally to the airport, but that's a specific provision about using carbon-free power.
Thank you for that.
Okay, LP, I may need to separately discuss that with you on wearing my other hat then.
Sure.
Okay, any further questions from the commissioners? Otherwise, I think we will thank Director Barrett for his time and patience as we bombarded him with lots of ideas. And I'm sure the new commissioners, the new commission will, be interested in continuing to be involved and have comments on potentially the sustainability aspects of the airport master plan.
I actually have a question. Can I squeeze one in? Is that okay?
Sure.
So Director Barrett, I'm curious, when you sort of envision a sustainable Palm Springs International Airport, what does that mean to you?
Wow, that's a loaded question.
Save space, brainstorm space. I'm
There's a lot
curious.
of things. So, and for a little bit of history for the commissioners that don't know my background, I actually moved here from Seattle, and SeaTac, where I used to work, is one of the more progressive airports in the country when it comes to sustainability in general, renewable energy, financial sustainability, things of that nature. I have a pretty good background or, context for it. I think when I look at Palm Springs, in some ways, we're in the right space at the right time, trying to figure things out. In other ways, we're far, far behind where we should be. And when I look at what sustainability looks like here, it's going to look like a well-run facility that's able to leverage the different areas of opportunities when it comes to sustainability in terms of not only the supply chain, but also the materials, our ability to reuse energy and find creative ways to reuse waste, things of that nature to help the facility run, in addition to reducing cost, operational cost, and our burden on the community as a whole. So I'm looking more holistically at the facility and at the organization, learning how to do things leaner, learning how to balance technology and with, manpower and with other components of the system to be able to optimize how we do things. That's how I envision sustainability for PSB.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks, commissioners, for letting me squeeze in a question.
Sure. All right, thank you, Director Barrett. I'm sure the new commissioners would love to hear you, on a regular basis. So I think this will be you heard the sort of interest of us on these issues.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
All right, thank you again. Appreciate your time.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now move to Chair's report. I will try to keep it fairly brief. This is, after 8 years, my last meeting as commissioner. I got probably 2 more years than I necessarily should have. But it's been a great pleasure serving on the commission. When I joined, our really first task was to adopt, finalize, and then adopt the sustainability plan that was adopted by council in June 2016. It has not been updated. Nevertheless, it serves as a very, very good roadmap for all of the matters that we've been doing. I still carry, to my mind, in my years, the comments of then council member Coors when this came before the commission, saying this is a great plan. We now expect you, Sustainability Commission, and staff to carry it out. It can't just be words on a page. This needs to be where we move our city. And I'd like to think that we've done exactly that. There's still an awful lot of things to be done, but just hit a couple of the highlights that I've been involved in. As I mentioned, we now have a community choice aggregator serving Palm Springs, which is essentially the key to meeting the city's greenhouse gas reduction matters. We've done a lot of work with forced bicycle routes, and there's still an awful lot to do. Former Chair Clark, who's on the line, and Commissioner Barrett were heavily involved in a lot of the waste reduction, in particular the ban of gas-powered leaf blowers. That was politically sensitive, but that's a major initiative. And while once again there is still some enforcement to do, I think our residents are greatly happy about that. We have turf conversion and an existing program, which I'll speak about because it came up again at the DWA board meeting. So I'll cover that in water area. And thanks to LP, we are recycling under SB 1383. Once again, always more to do, composting, things like that. So if you look at sort of the at the sustainability plan, while there's a lot still to be done, there's a lot that has been done. And I want to thank my fellow commissioners, former Chair Clark, who's on the line, LP staff, and the previous staff for really getting an awful lot done. I think our commission has the deserved reputation of being really one of the hardest working commissions, where essentially initiatives are essentially done bottom up. So it's the commissioners who come up with the ideas and then do a lot of the work to carry them out. And that's a little different than maybe some of the other commissions that sort of have larger staffs than we are, because we're sort of expected to do that. So word for the new commissioners, you'll be put to work. So I will continue, particularly in my other capacity, be working very closely with LP. I'll mention a couple of a couple of things that I'll be continuing to work on. So I will be off the commission, but LP knows where to find me. I have really the institutional memory of 8 years of Sustainability Commission matters that I largely carry in my head. So I am happy to serve as a resource there. So thank you very much for a fairly lengthy chair's report. It's been an excellent 8 years. I did not think when I got involved that it would then turn into my day job and night job and weekend job. But here I am and working closely with LP on matters, being a fellow sustainability staff person. And with that, we will now turn it over to LP for her staff comments and welcome our new commissioner. So out with the old and in with the new.
Oh goodness, well, that's a hard one to follow. I probably should have swapped this agenda around to make it a little bit more favorable, so I don't have to kind of match the speed. But again, I think I know everyone, but in case new commissioners, we haven't had a chance to speak in a while, LP is usually what I go by. You can call me or email me, but usually email is faster because a lot of people call us, because actually, Commissioner Baker, I have something I will follow up with you about offline. Our phone number is now listed on Apple Maps for DAP Health. So I get a lot of calls and I redirect them to DAP Health. Actually, the phone is not a great way to reach me at this time because I get like 100 calls a day. So I'm trying, but thank you for those who are emailing me and I'll fix it soon. Anyways, small problems. So most of what I want to talk about today is relating to our sort of cycle of commissioners, but just wanted to take a second to give you a quick flavor of some of what I keep talking about myself in the plural, but it's kind of just me, have been up to over the past couple of weeks. So one thing that some of the commission members know, but we are welcoming our first new staff member on Monday. Christian Wheeler is joining us from a master's program where Christian has been studying a lot related to sustainability data and planning. And so has good experience working in communities, has also a lot of experience working as a code enforcement officer and a variety of different interesting things. So Christian will be joining us soon. The initial portfolio that Christian will be focusing on is around greenhouse gas emissions inventory and planning. So I know that's been a little bit, we've been meaning to update that inventory here for a second. So that's going to be Christian's first job, is digging into the updated inventory and then we'll look as a group with this commission on making updates to our sustainability plan. So David, thank you for teeing that up because I was going to mention it. And then also looking at transportation. So one of the things I'll mention here in a minute when I sort of thank the outgoing commissioners. I know a lot of people on this commission have worked hard on getting our transportation surveying ready, because really as a group, we're ready to take on a multimodal and kind of multi-stakeholder approach. It's also something we've been getting a lot of questions from the council about. So really getting out into the community, understanding how people are moving around, what those barriers are to getting out of gas cars. So that's another thing that we'll be working closely with engineering on, but Christian will be kind of digging in both on the data side and then kind of jumping in on some of our community engagement and outreach work, starting with transportation. So very excited to be talking to more humans. So that will be great. Speaking of which, Chair Friedman also mentioned this as well. I, at the very last minute, but very luckily got to spend last week at the California, all right, what does SEEC stand for? CCEC.
California Climate and Energy Collaborative.
Thank you, Chair Friedman. Up in Santa Rosa for 3 days, working with a lot of different people, staff around the state, from regional energy networks, from municipalities of all sizes, from mission aligned firms of various types. I write really small, as many of you know. This is notes from the workshop or from the conference. So I have a lot to do, a lot to kind of churn through and things to move forward on. Definitely a lot of conversation around building electrification and retrofits, which I know is something that we've been talking a little bit about as this group, ties in closely to some of the REACH codes work that the commission has been looking at. And for those of you who are like, REACH codes, what? We'll come back to it, I promise. Not today, but we will.
No, we will come back to it today because it'll be in my green building report.
Very good. So we'll come back to it later. And we also held a mini shredding event on Saturday. So that was an attempt to make up for the kerfuffle that I will take responsibility for at the end of April. So we did have, I would say we had the turnout I expected, which wasn't super high, but was pretty steady throughout the day. So, you know, perfectly manageable for the small crew we had on site. We did work with a new local vendor we hadn't worked with before called iShred, who did a fantastic job, you know, really was on top of it, really thorough, ran, you know, I barely even had to do anything. It was great. So that was helpful for, I know we had a few members of the community who are pretty disappointed to not be able to shred at the end of April. And then we'll be going out to get some requests. And I know we talked a little bit about revisiting this with new commissioners now that we have them, maybe at our next subcommittee meetings on what's the right model for our shredding events going forward. But just in case, we're going to go ahead and start getting bids for next year's shredding, and then we can kind of work from there on whether we want to start working with other organizations to co-sponsor. Anything else? I think that's it from updates. Though at the end, I'd be happy to answer any questions or if I left anything out. I do want to transition over to welcoming our new commissioners. Before we say farewell, we will say hello. So we have two of our three newly appointed commissioners, if I could get the words out. Speed talking does trip you up sometimes. So two of our three have been sworn in today. So thank you both for your rapidity and coming in to meet with our city clerk and getting sworn in. Really appreciate that to make sure we could have you all ready to participate today. I will put you on the spot and ask for you to, you know, introduce yourselves, just kind of, you know, where do you live in Palm Springs? What made you interested in joining the commission? You know, what are kind of two sustainability experiences, let's say, that you've had, either personally or professionally, and what you are hoping to get out of this, knowing very little about anything that the commission actually does. So maybe since Commissioner Grubel, you unmuted first, I will call on you first.
Thanks, LP. Hello, everyone. Dean Grubel. Sorry about my wife was just on a Zoom call earlier, actually all afternoon. I come down here from the Bay Area, from Oakland. I ran a conference center in South San Francisco for many years. And so being new to the area, I thought this is a great thing. It's kind of a passion of mine up from the Bay Area about sustainability and keeping the planet that we have. So that was one of my main objectives, is to join this commission and move it forward. So it's going to be an honor working with everyone and getting to know everyone as well. So good job so far, everyone. And thanks, David, for the 8 years that you put in. Good job. Thank you.
So thank you, Commissioner. And Commissioner Ratner, I will turn it to you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bernard Rotner. I know some of you. I have been a resident full-time in Palm Springs for about 3 years. We've been coming down for many, many, many years from the Bay Area. I was born in San Bernardino, have family around in the area. So it's an area that I've always loved. My work background was in, I have an undergraduate degree in urban planning. I have a master's in, it's called Sustainable Solutions, and have always been a passion of mine to do sustainable things, and worked in education for community colleges and universities, and worked on various LEED building projects. And my current passion right now is electrifying my home and working through the challenges. And it's not as easy as I thought it would be. So it's fun learning that. And I hope to share some of the things that I learned through that process and help people, if they're wanting to do it, to ease into that. Because I think it's important to get away from gas. I think that's it. I'm looking forward to working with everybody.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. I appreciate you being willing to be put on the spot. Appreciate that we have some strong Bay Area expertise that we're plugging into the commission, and some really diverse personal and professional experience that we'll be able to kind of add to the mix. So really grateful for your joining us, and looking forward to continuing to dig in. So once we have our third appointed commissioner sworn in, we'll do kind of like an orientation. So I, admittedly, this is my first new round of having commissioners appointed. So I'll just confirm, whether that happens like after a meeting. Does it have to happen one-on-one? Like there's Brown Act rules. I just want to make sure I figure out. So I will work with you all to schedule that if it is on a different schedule than our normal commission meetings, just to give you a sense of like, what has the commission done? What are kind of the roles and responsibilities, blah, blah. So we'll do that soon. But if anybody has any questions today, obviously feel free to either ask today or just preferably email, not call me. But I'll make sure everybody has my cell as well. I'll put it in the chat if that's easier. And then, so I will now transition over to very briefly and succinctly thanking our commissioners who have been working with us and with me for my entirety of my time here in this office. So, as excited as I am to see new faces, I've gotten pretty used to seeing some of our consistent faces on the call, and it'll be very strange to have a monthly meeting without the faces I have come to know in rectangle form, and also I think have now met in person, all of you. So that's good. But so I will start by thanking Commissioner Torrens because he's not here for at least, and also because my perspective is small and short. His continued devotion to the transportation survey. Really have been very grateful for all of the commissioners willingness to dig in and work on things that are hard and slow and complicated, and work with us on solving all those problems. That's a theme you're going to hear. Commissioner Torrens, I know particularly both from their focus on working on composting and having a real resident-centered perspective there, and making sure we kind of get more people using those systems and understand how we're communicating and getting that out into our communities, and in understanding how we're going to really design our multimodal transportation future and the kind of data that we're going to need to do that, and bridging all of our different stakeholder groups. So I'm mostly saying this for the minutes, just in case Commissioner Torrens looks at them later. I will move on to talking about Commissioner Vice Chair Baker, who stepped up gamely to be our vice chair. So thank you very much for doing that. And for all of that you have done, particularly to shepherd our public health focus here as part of the commission. Speaking of long and complicated, difficult problems, helping to get our smoking ordinance to what I would say is a pretty good long-term spot. I will probably still be asking you for questions about it once we get that unblocked. I'm sure you will be a crucial part of whatever that future looks like, because we're still committed to getting that done. So, for the health of all of our residents and making sure that everyone is equitably benefiting from that clean air. So thank you for, all of your institutional, understanding that you've shared with me on that, all of your work that you've done, both for the public health of our city in general, but as part of our commission as well. So thank you for all of your work there. And Commissioner Friedman, who I feel like I consider an extended member of the staff at times, kind of because you are the program lead for Desert Community Energy, which is a major, a major part of our sustainability portfolio that many members of this commission had a huge hand in getting over the line. We are still the envy of every city in the state in terms of having our own CCA with access to 100% renewable. And then outside of the state, it's like, people are just like, what do you mean you have that? That's crazy. So when I talk to my old colleagues back on the East Coast, they're very mad at me. And I am happy about that. And so, Commissioner Friedman, with your laser focus on detail and ability to keep us, within the rules, but also understanding like how we can continue to push forward faster, farther, and better, and all of your work that you've done. I know you most effectively through the work on the REACH codes, but also all the work that you've done to shepherd and lead DCE, embedding it there at CVAG and getting the Inland Regional Energy Network up and running, which last week's conference really showed me all of the power of regional energy networks. And really, I think that's going to be a massive boon for our region as well. So glad to have all of you continuing as part of our sustainability extended network. I will not let you flee as hard as you might try. I do know where all of you live, and Palm Springs is very small. But speaking of which, I will make sure to follow up with all of you who are departing us today. We do have some small certificates that we would like to distribute to you. So I will make sure that those get to you. I know we're not meeting in person, so I can't hand them to you right now, but we will bring those by at a location of your greatest convenience sometime in the next week or so. So I'll reach out to everybody to make sure we can do that. But yeah, I'm very excited to continue to have our new focus on the commission and continue to work on the great plans and roadmaps that everyone has laid in place for us. So thanks for building us a really strong foundation, and we're going to keep going. So that's kind of all I've got on that. The small item on the FY24 and FY25 budget is that they haven't taken any of the things that we want out, so we're good. But if anyone has any questions on that process, there have been no changes or particularly significant inquiry on sustainability items, which I'm taking as good. So I'll pause here for any questions. I will liberally interpret questions to also be if anyone has anything else they want to highlight or say about our commission transition, feel free to do so. That there's also time at the end to do that. But that's all I got.
Thank you very much. Any further comments on questions for LP? And I will miss you as well, but not really, because you know where to find me. And you'll be getting an email from me shortly after from my other day job, shortly after this meeting.
Well, I'm mostly glad that this is one fewer thing on your plate, because I've told people I feel like Chair Friedman's like athletic trainer, where I'm sometimes like, did you eat? Are you sleeping? Are you hydrated? Like, when was the last time you went to bed? So
you don't want to, I will not answer those questions in a Brown Act public meeting.
And I do not actually want to let our dear Commissioner Barrett go unmentioned here, as neither a new nor old commissioner who is going to be bravely stewarding us into our sort of transitioned future. So Commissioners Grubel and Rotner, Commissioner Barrett has been an extraordinary resource for me as I have been joining the office, has been, very generous with time and knowledge, as all of the commissioners have been, but particularly grateful for Commissioner Barrett, as you were the chair when I first joined, for telling me that we have to post the agenda and various other requirements that we have to do, and also all of your expertise and really kind of like people-centered vision on this. So looking forward to continuing to work together, and Commissioners Grubel and Rotner, I'm sure we'll be leaning on you a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Anything, if there are no further matters, we're skipping over the minutes. That'll be next month, and old business and turf conversion.
Oh yeah, that's me again. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a short little kind of almost a preview, I think maybe of a July conversation, but really wanted to make sure I also caught our outgoing commissioners on this really quickly. But part of our success in the budget process, and also my computer's been really slow today, so sorry if everything's like really lagging. Let me know if it's truly incomprehensible. I'm just waiting for my slides to come up so I can share the screen. Nothing super detailed here, but I just want to have a little framework for our conversation. And as you will see, my computer froze earlier, so I was not able to remove the other template slides from this, but I will only show you 2 of these slides today, if I'm able to click on the thing. Thanks for your patience. Is everyone seeing kind of like a slide that says turf conversion rebate match number 2?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I am not sure what's going on with my computer windows. Oh, that's because I have 2 of the same window open. That would explain it. Okay, let me see. If I do this, does it still work? Are you still seeing slide?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Sorry I'm normally a little bit more on top of my technology than this. So basically the reason I'm bringing this to the commission, so we'll have over $1 million, assuming knock wood that this week's budget hearing or next week's budget hearing goes according to plan, which, like I've said, we have no indication otherwise, but you never know. DWA and Commissioner Friedman, or Chair Friedman may mention this in the DWA report out, has about 3 times as much funding as we do allocated toward grass removal or turf conversion rebates for next fiscal year, which is, that's pretty much, it's like a little bit more than they've had in years past, but it's roughly consistent with what they've allocated toward this and on an annual basis. So based on our experience from this year's program, they've made a couple of recommendations for ways that we might improve the operational efficiency of the program. And by operational efficiency, I mean things like cutting down any confusion for applicants, making it easier on the DWA end to figure out which projects are in versus out, making sure we don't have situations where, we might have one category of project that can still be accepted, but another category that can't, and then leading to confusion of somebody being like, well, do I count as an HOA project if I'm an individual who lives in an HOA, or is my money already gone? Or, and then commercial projects also weren't particularly, we didn't have any commercial projects that applied last year, but we also did not call for commercial projects. That would have been a bit of a tricky one because we didn't have any funding dedicated there. So the recommendations from DWA are noted here on the slide. Really kind of three parts. And I'll just read them before I sort of give my take on any of this, but curious for y'all's thoughts as well. And to kind of skip ahead, I think it probably makes sense for us to also have this conversation at the July meeting, just to make sure if we want to get any public comment on this, we can. This was sort of just like a late breaking set of recommendations, so we didn't have time to notice it and post a staff report before this meeting, but this is kind of just a preview. So the main change that the DWA is recommending here is that we sort of we move the slider on the amount of city rebate per project for two reasons. One is to make sure that we are kind of like stretching our dollar as far as it goes. So, and this is a bit of an assumption, I guess, we don't really have data, or like we haven't A/B tested this necessarily, but sort of the theory is that with every additional dollar that we add to the match will motivate that next tranche of projects, right? So, the $3 DWA match, $3 per square foot motivates a certain amount of projects. We did basically $6 last year. That motivated a whole bunch of additional projects. And the theory is that, somewhere in between there, we will motivate maybe not quite as many as the $6, but still more than the $3. And so in order to basically take that 3-to-1 funding formula ratio, where DWA has a little more than 3 million allocated to this, and we'd have around 1 million, they're recommending that we do a 3-to-1 match. So DWA provides $3 per square foot, and the city provides $1 per square foot. The operational efficiency there is that any project that applies and qualifies for the rebate would just get the city money. There wouldn't be the question of like, you applied at this date, and so you can get the DWA money, but you can't get the city money because the city money already ran out. Like that created, I think, a lot of consternation last year for applicants. The flip side of that is that we may not be capturing those projects that are kind of in that maybe a little bit more marginal state where, they may not be able to afford to do it for the $3. So is the $4 going to motivate that many more projects? One of the needles we've been trying to thread with DWA is really how we get into particularly low income projects. So low income property owners, the residents on fixed incomes, et cetera. We did have money allocated last year or in the last program specifically for that population, where it was an enhanced rebate where they received $8, up to $8 per square foot for an eligible project. DWA has had people like on the ground in these neighborhoods for like 6 months, doing outreach, multilingual, multi-channel outreach. And I think they've got about 9 projects that have qualified there, and we have the ability to support up to 30. So that doesn't quite, and they also did it's not really a direct install program, but a direct pay program for landscapers, so that landscapers would be able to receive the rebate directly, thus reducing the need for a customer to have to pay up front and then receive the rebate after. And we didn't end up actually, I think we might have motivated 1 project through that. So DWA has been pounding the pavement on this for sure, but we still haven't quite threaded the needle there on the right thing. I think there's a lot of different reasons why that's true. We can get into a discussion if we want, or we can kind of save that for later. We don't have a ton of data on this. But so my sort of thought on the flip side of doing this 3-to-1 match is that we might lose those kind of like middle income to lower income projects that might have been motivated by the higher rebate that we wouldn't get otherwise. So that's kind of the major change that's proposed. 2 other changes that are proposed. One is removing or addressing the project size cap. So I know we talked about this as a commission a little bit. We wanted to get the project out or the funding out the door at first with the 5,000 square foot cap, $5,000 per project cap, which is about 1,700 square feet. I misspoke, I apologize. And to make sure that we got just a lot of projects as opposed to 1 project taking all the money. DWA has suggested that for operational efficiency, and then so we can also get into those bigger HOA projects, which I know are also a priority, that we look at minimum raising the cap, which I think we had talked about as this group potentially trying to do, maybe going to a 10,000 square foot cap or even 15. DWA would ideally have us remove the cap, but they're open to us kind of just moving where that is a little bit. And then finally, they recommend removing the project buckets that reserve funding by type. The reason for this being that we did have a much longer runway for HOA projects last year because those projects were just a little bit slower to get off the ground. But ended up, you know, for example, since we had the low income funding dedicated and we didn't have as many projects in that category, it made it more difficult for us to then flex that funding over to a different category if we wanted to do that, et cetera. So they recommend for operations streamlining, removing those buckets. So before I get into discussion, I do want to kind of just flip over to the kind of what's the framing for the discussion. So questions that I have for you all, before we get into maybe a discussion of the options themselves, like is there any additional data that it would be helpful for you to look at that we could either request or try to pull together, like slice and dice? Or any questions about any of these that we could try to answer? Some of them may not be answerable based on what we know, but what we can try to get. And then do you think we should basically bring this back in July for a more formal discussion? Or is this something that you kind of think might work as like a guidance item? And then finally, do you have any other program changes that we should look at as part of this? So I know we've talked a lot. I'm going to stop sharing because it's making my screen really laggy. But if anyone wants me to reshare, I can do that.
Thank you, commissioners. I'll let you lead the discussion. I have a few comments at the end. Commissioner Gould, I think I wasn't sure whether you want to speak first. Go ahead.
LP, is there a way you can send that over to me?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can. I'll make sure to send the slides right after the meeting.
Look at it. I told you this before. I love this idea of doing this, especially with the state in Arizona and Nevada with its water problems and so forth. I would love to see our HOAs get heavily involved in this. And so with a cap at 1,700 square feet, I'm all for getting that number up as much as possible on that. The other question I have, and being at City Hall today, getting sworn in, there's tons of grass outside of City Hall and a lot of the city buildings. Is there a way that we can work with Public Works to, I don't know, take out the grass and put in more sustainable plant so that the city's showing the residents that we're doing this too, instead of asking them? Just a thought.
Yeah, totally. So I can speak to that really briefly because that is the City Hall grass is a big sore thumb. Like I often I refer to a class of problems as sore thumb problems where, like, you know, either you put in one weird image on a slide, like I had this very salient moment very early in my career where I was working on an offshore wind project in New York City. And there was like a rendering that wasn't it wasn't a 2-scale rendering at all. But it was intended to show that, like, if we have offshore wind, you'll barely see them. And it was like a rendering of just some random project, wasn't even the project we were talking about in the slide deck. And people, like, we did not move past that slide because people were quibbling. They were just like, was it going to look like that? Because I don't like how that looks. Like, you know, so there's like the sore thumb thing that derails the whole conversation. For us, it is the City Hall grass. Also the airport grass. So I appreciated Chair Friedman that you brought that one up. It's the airport grass, library grass, and City Hall grass. Those are the 3 sore thumb grass. So in terms of the City Hall grass, so we actually had to do some homework this year to make sure the grass isn't landmarked, because part of the long story. The answer is it isn't, which is great because the City Hall, and actually I have a super interesting, maybe if we bring this back up at a later meeting, we had some really cool historical information that Ken Lyon, one of our urban planners, pulled together on like the history of City Hall's landscaping. Really fascinating, like beautiful historic desert landscaping, that kind of thing. So we are working on putting in place what the plans are for doing that landscaping. That budget request did not make it into the package this year, but next year we're hoping to resubmit it once we have a little bit more detail on the plan. It's also something we can apply for grant funding for, and also we can take advantage of some of this funding theoretically, though I do want to make sure that's as available as we can make it for the public. So I'd love to not tap this much, but we have been beneficiaries of DWA match funding in the past. And agree with you on that makes sense, noted, and makes sense on increasing the size cap to make sure HOAs can participate.
LP, I'm having trouble remembering I knew that we were flying in the dark when we started creating that program.
Yep.
A year ago, I guess it was. And we were trying to make sure that a variety of types of projects were covered and things like that. I think a lot of us leaned on, I know I did, leaned on the large the large HOAs that are all grass in that project. And I just did something to my computer, hold on. There we go. My computer's acting up. So I guess I would like to see more data behind all of this and have more time on this, because as you know, I'm slightly hard of hearing, and so I was having trouble following all of that as we went through there. So I would like that we do this in July again and spend more time on it to understand why we're making these changes and how they have an effect on what were some of our original thoughts on the agendas for those, for the various types of projects. And I would like to I would like to revisit our documentation from that first time to see how we've lost, where our goals fit in with what DWA wants to do. So I'm asking that we do it in July.
That makes sense. Yeah, that would give, so that'll give us that would give me time to also finalize like a broader staff report that I can build on the previous one, so we can revisit those previous assumptions and make sure that those are kind of like treated in a slightly more longitudinal and reasoned way to get a little bit of that data that, you know, Anita had pulled some data a couple months ago, and I can update that as well.
I'm laughing at myself. I can only, I miss parts. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry, I think my sound is not good today. Is that true also?
It's not perfect.
Okay, sorry. I'll work on getting that fixed.
LP, a quick question with DWA. Are they under some guidelines of how much water they need to conserve in the next coming fiscal years at this point, or what are they saying?
Good question. So the specific targets on or requirements and statewide guidance to reduce has not been renewed for this year, is my understanding. They're still working to reduce those kind of long-term water commitments. So they're still focusing on this, and we'll keep pushing it, but they're not going to have, I think they had like a 25% statewide target last year. That is not in place this year, as far as I know.
Okay. Do we know when they might have an idea when they'll come in with their target?
I don't know that they're expecting one this year. I don't know that that necessarily means one couldn't be instated like from the state, but I don't think based on our current water conditions, they're expecting one. But Chair Friedman, I don't know if maybe.
Yeah,
because
I can address this because I attend and someone will hopefully take over starting next month, liaison to DWA. So I attended this morning's meeting. I'll report on that. But really quickly, there was, of course, the statewide drought emergency declaration when the entire state was flooding and the reservoirs were pretty close to full. That was essentially, it wasn't canceled. It was simply allowed to expire, which it did actually, I think, believe it or not, really just like 2 weeks ago. I believe I recall that it would have expired like on June 12th. So there aren't any current issues. One of the challenges is that the state has either too much water or not enough water. And there was actually something, it may have been actually in I saw something that I just read, that the state needs to have a not feast or famine, but rather a long-term policy. There are some provisions there, but for the moment, other than previous rules about not wasting water and the DWA's sort of commitment from the previous drought to reduce consumption 10 to 13% below the 2013 baseline. That was a baseline from the previous drought, which they've largely achieved. There isn't anything there. Clearly, there was it came up in this morning's meeting, and they've noted 3.7 million, and also sort of anticipating the conversation that we're having now. So it remains a commitment of DWA, fortunately, but not a specific, at least for the moment, state mandate. No, any other commissioners? I have just a couple of quick thoughts on my way out the door on this one. Interim Chair Baker, any further thoughts? Commissioner Rotner?
Nothing from me at this time.
Okay, just in terms of process, particularly since the agenda was not posted on the city website until this afternoon, it was still satisfied the Brown Act because it was at City Hall. We have several members of the community that have previously commented, so I think that it would be quite useful to get the agenda out in July along with the staff report to get public comment. So that's in terms of process. There's an issue that came up both at our commission as well as with council, and I think it just needs to be in the staff report about potential AstroTurf, because it is allowed under DWA, and to the extent that we essentially are just doing a 3-to-1 match, that's easy, but on the other hand, there may be some concerns about that. So LP, that may be some discussion that you need to have with Ashley Metzger. I know she's continuing to take the lead in her new sort of staff position, or agency that she works for now. So I would suggest sort of just to flag that so that there's no surprise, in terms of the public, in terms of where that came. But I think simplifying programs as a program administrator, program manager, you always want to have your programs as simple as possible, saying apply to DWA, you get $3 from DWA and $1 from the city. That's a really easy program to administer. So it would be my recommendation. I mean, it's certainly what DWA is saying is we want to get these funds out the door as soon as possible and as broadly spread as possible. So ease of administration is preferable. So those would be my comments. Yeah.
Let me second sort of what David is saying in the sense of, just David mentioning the AstroTurf. I had forgotten about that issue. That is documented in what we sent out long ago. So I think we need that context of what we did last year to see how it fits around with this and balance those decisions.
I think it should be flagged in the staff report and let members of the public, decide. And of course, the new commissioners, let them provide their direction on that one. But it's a sensitive issue, on all concerned.
Right. We had some fairly strong public input last year. So
Want that forgotten.
I'll make sure to bring that into the staff report. Yeah, that is a very, like you've all said, very popular topic.
Another sore thumb.
Yes, indeed.
Any further comments from the other commissioners on this issue? Okay, thank you very much then. All right, next, old business, back to you, LP.
Okay, so I'm realizing as I'm looking at the agenda that it's not necessarily out of order in terms of agenda, but in terms of like theoretical. So basically the next two items we have are deciding whether we want to resume meeting in person with the new commissioners, and also election of chair and vice chair, because our current interim chair and interim vice chair are part of our departing coalition today. So we will at least need someone to chair and vice chair the next meeting. But I will leave it up to the commissioners as to how we want to handle that. But the first item is revisiting whether we want to return to in-person meetings starting next month. So reviewing old commission minutes, it looks like, the latest consensus from the currently departing and current group, I guess, as I'll call them, was that this is something that maybe once the new commissioners were on board, we would transition back. Report from other commissions. So many of our commissions have returned to meeting in person, though according to our city clerk's office, we're still able to meet remotely. But it's sort of a one-way street. So it's kind of like if we go back to meeting in person, then we need to continue meeting in person. But if we want to, and occasionally if an individual member needs to join remotely, that is being allowed in other commissions. But once we kind of go back to in person, we're back. Eventually they will probably tell us we have to go either way. I believe that I would say probably 85% of the commissions are back to in person, with one or two who are still meeting remotely. But again, if there's a particular meeting where no one can make it in person, but we need to have the meeting, we can probably address it a little bit. It is my understanding, but I've been kind of learning by doing. So I will stop talking and let the commissioners figure out what they want to do.
I'm going to defer to Commissioner Barrett because we'll talk about the next agenda item, but I think this should be a decision by the new commissioner. I would just note that CVAG now has returned to in-person meetings, and as a Brown Act perspective, AB 361, which is the current framework, does expire at the end of this year. So it's a window. The city council continues to do the findings to support the commissioners, but that window will literally be closed in the next couple of months. So so the new commissioner should sort of think about that. They'll need to meet in person probably sooner rather than later in any case.
Could I ask a question of the two new commissioners? If we had met in person today, would that have made a difference of whether or not you could have been here?
Not for me.
Okay.
Not for me.
Okay, I mean, I'm asking that because we may still get some more new commissioners, besides that we have a third who will be joining us in July. I mean, it would seem that we could wait until July to make that decision, but I think that in person would be helpful.
I agree.
So do I. I think since we're new, it'd be nice to shake one another's hands and get to know one another.
Yeah, I know Bernard from 1PS, but that's well, actually, I've met you at 1PS also, I think, somewhere. But I'm hard of hearing, even with hearing aids. And so it helps to be in person. It just gives you more of the context. So I would prefer that we go back to in person.
Yeah, that sounds great for me. Also, I think giving public involvement too, as well, in person might be a little easier, potentially. I don't know. I could be thinking differently, but.
So we are still able to maintain the Zoom for public comment. That's what some of the other commissioners are doing. So we can kind of try that out and see. I think actually we might be required to maintain the Zoom for public comment. We'll probably, I mean, for recording and transcription purposes, I'll also still run a Zoom just so I have the recording. And it'll make it easier for us to do minutes and things like that. But so we can kind of see, you know, do we still have members of the public mostly online or calling in, or are we seeing people kind of come and join us in person?
Since we know 2 or 3 of the people who would most likely come as public comment, or maybe 4 of them, I think most of them would be willing to come if it was in person. So, David, or should we take a vote?
I think this is because of I think this is probably just direction from the new commissioners. I think that's fairly clear. And obviously from public participation, having members of the public who aren't able to make it to City Hall because they're at work or other commitments, being able to phone in their public comment is certainly preferable from particularly issues like water conservation and turf. We want to get this broad as possible then. That's something that Commissioner Barrett, you could mention at 1PS that the commission will return to in-person meetings, but public comment via Zoom, particularly on the water issue, will remain welcome.
Okay.
I think that's the direction, sort of direction of the new commissioners, which always had been that.
LP, I guess the question will be, if we have new commissioners, we'll have to decide on the room we're going to meet in. Development
I believe
Services usually works.
they have us all going to the large conference room here at City Hall because that's the one that's set up for the remote broadcasting. Oh no, that's not good.
The large conference room, and I do not agree, but it is the one that's designed for those things. So
The acoustics are not ideal. I know they have been also working on the small conference room to see if they've added like the webcam and the simulcast capabilities. I'll check in with our IT and AV folks. We also can work on doing some amplification in the room if that would be helpful. We can test some things out if you want.
yeah, the table in the large conference room is too large to follow people well. So if they can get that small conference room, that's a very nice room. So we'll
For
have
the
to
new
go with what's available.
That's true. For the new commissioners, those rooms are right next to each other. So there's no great confusion with the location, luckily. But yeah, I will reach out to the AV team and see if they're doing commissions in small yet. I know they do closed session and things like that in there, but those aren't broadcasted. So I'll find out this week. Okay, great. So it sounds like that item is accomplished. Are we moving on to new business?
Yes, so new business election of chair and vice chair. This is once again sort of for the new commissioners. I did look before the meeting at the at the ordinance section of the municipal code that governs the Sustainability Commission, which talks about annual elections of chair and vice chair. While I defer to the new Commissioner Barrett is continuing and new commissioner, it says at the creation of the commission and annually thereafter. At least implicitly, the annually would sort of be on July 1 after each new commission is constituted. So while I would leave this to Commissioner Barrett and the two new commissioners, I think the spirit of the ordinance would be to wait until July 1 when a new commissioner will be has been appointed and will be sworn in, as well as there are potentially new commissioners that could be appointed at the council meeting on June 29th. I'm not sure whether that's in the works or not, but my recommendation, and that's just a recommendation because it would up to be to the others to decide, would be to leave that opportunity for the new commission. And in terms of chair and vice chair, how we did it at Desert Community Energy in our first meeting of the year, where the two directors appointed by the respective cities, Councilmember Middleton and Veronica Chavez, the finance director of Palm Springs, we didn't have an election of chair or vice chair, and so that election was the first thing on the agenda and was run by Tom Kirk as Desert Community Energy Executive Director. So if there is a deferral, once again leaving that to Commissioner Barrett and two other new commissioners, the recommendation is that Commissioner Barrett work closely with LP to develop the agenda, and literally the first thing on the agenda would be election of chair and vice chair, which she would run, and then immediately hand the gavel over to the elected chair. So that would be, once again, that's my recommendation. I think that's kind of the spirit of the ordinance, but we do have, two new commissioners, so would defer to you about whether you want to proceed now with election or wait until the July meeting, where there's be at least one new commissioner sworn in attendance.
I would happen to agree with that, to postpone it until July, so the other commissioner comes in. Are you okay with that, LP?
Yeah, I'm good. Y'all just let me know. As long as I know who to bug about agenda, I'm good.
So Don, are you the only one that's left
Yes.
from?
Yes, and I would, because I'm the continuing commissioner, I would work with LP on the agenda, but I would check with each of you before we establish the agenda for the meeting.
Be careful about that, please, because
Brown
that's
Act,
Brown
right.
Act, yes. So forgive me,
I know.
my lawyer.
Individually,
Yeah,
not
well,
collectively.
just be careful because you will be the majority of the commission. So I think
Right.
it's best just for you and LP to work together with the agenda. And my recommendation there is for our new commissioners is that if they have any specific topics that they would like to add to the agenda, that they send an email to LP. And then she can then have that, and then have that discussion with you. And forgive me, once a Brown Act Ayatollah, always a Brown Act Ayatollah, and Vice Chair Baker will know all about that because we were very much involved in the public integrity task force. Was it now 7 years ago? But yeah. That would be my Brown Act recommendation. LP, that's also when you have the new commissioners, a Brown Act sort of briefing would be useful from the city clerk's office.
Yes, we'll work on scheduling that.
Yeah, you won't
Always
have
be
to
requested
sort of
myself.
ask for, immediate Brown Act questions for.
Oh, which reminds me, do we have a date for the citywide ethics training for the new commissioners? Is that usually in the springtime?
Good question. My understanding is that it has not been scheduled. But I will bug the clerk's office about it.
We haven't had that. We haven't had that this
Had it from
current fiscal
COVID.
year, so that would be something that's useful as particularly that you could follow up with the city clerk's office for that. That was a very good training. That
Yeah.
My recollection is Anthony Mejia and Jeff Ballinger did that maybe even pre-COVID, but
Pre-COVID, I think, was the
training,
last one.
yeah, I remember we were in the convention center and it was good training.
I don't recall a citywide ethics training, so I
Yeah,
don't.
there was one, but
Yeah, they did
it's
a
sort of-
mandatory.
it's BC.
Yeah, PC.
Okay.
Okay, if that's sufficient direction for LP, work with Commissioner Barrett on the July agenda, and first thing on the agenda would be election of chair and vice chair.
Great. That sounds good. That works for me.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. All right, moving along. Standing Committee on Waste Reduction, Commissioner Barrett, any?
I had a personal emergency in May and we ended up not scheduling one in June, so we didn't meet. LP and I have talked separately about putting some energy back into battery boxes, partly because we need to remind people in 1PS for that. So that's sort of on our agenda, but it's not something that we've discussed in the subcommittee. I will bring it up there.
Okay, thank you.
And maybe, should we explain what the subcommittees are for the new commissioners really quickly?
That would be the recommendation, is that you put that also on the agenda, is
Okay.
appointment of well, it's not only appointment, but basically looking at the current roster and saying, who is this, because different commissioners will have different focuses. So I think the whole
Right.
sort of that maybe just even a without the exact of the agenda, it's subcommittees and a report, and then just decide who wants to do what.
That was my suggestion also.
There'll be different focuses there. Next, ad hoc subcommittee on strategic planning and general plan update, interim chair Friedman. I'm going to pass this to interim vice chair Baker, because I believe the general plan steering committee, after many almost years of absence, did meet quite recently.
Yes, so we just met and we're at the closing of the public engagement sessions. And we do have a meeting coming up. What is this? I think it should be in July, if I'm not mistaken. But it is slowly moving forward. And I'm happy to either stay on for a session or two until you have a new person to join. So that's no problem on my end.
Yeah, because that's not an ex officio appointment. I think you serve on that, because you're a wonderful person.
I'll take that.
Okay.
Very community involvement. Okay, thank you. All right, solar and green building. I'll have more detailed report on DCE and IREN, but just a couple of things which are a little bit overlapping. First of all, as LP mentioned, we attended the SEEC conference, California Climate and Energy Collaborative Conference. And in conjunction with that, the California Energy Commission did a workshop there at the hotel on the Equitable Building Decarbonization Initiative. And they had a separate workshop in Indio just this past Thursday. So while it's not formally an IREN program, because IREN doesn't have any residential programs, this is something that will continue. And there's the opportunity for the city to be involved and make sure that, and working with IREN, but this largely the city would need to take a lead to make sure that information on that program is available when it launches, who would be eligible for that. So that would be, and I'll of course be continuing to monitor that program, and particularly LP. I believe you mentioned there was somebody from the Economic Development Department who was at the Indio workshop.
Yep.
Yeah, so that would be largely a city focused. They will be monitoring it via IREN, but I'm not taking the lead on that. Two sort of somewhat overlapping issues, and LP, you saw the emails that I started, and the commission was very involved in two commission initiatives that I'll be continuing, but I will deal with this at this level of solar and green building, are the two REACH codes. And as LP knows that there is a, when she asked me when we first met about federal preemption, little did I know that literally would be the most sort of, you know, and Vice Chair Baker has heard me talk about that, really one of the most hot topics in REACH code land. So I will be working with LP to continue the work that I have been doing at the commission level on two REACH codes. One is on our cannabis industry to have them be more energy efficient. And there's some other provisions that we need to work on. So LP will email each other and maybe set up a meeting in the next week or so with staff so we can move forward on that. And the other one that I've been working on for literally 2 or 3 years now is an existing home energy efficiency REACH code. That is not a mandate, but essentially says that if you're pulling a building permit, you're doing some work on your house, you should be doing some energy efficiency upgrades to go along with that. The general view is that ordinance, because the REACH code would not be a mandate of what equipment to use or what fuel source to use, it would not fall within the potential preemption of this Ninth Circuit case. So that work will continue in my IRN capacity, but I wanted to raise it here because these are two really good examples of work that I initiated in my commission capacity without necessarily understanding that it would then become my day job. But this is really a good example of how the commission comes up with initiatives that then, you know, move forward. So I'll save the rest for IRN and DC at the end, but those are two areas that I've been working on in solar and green building. All right, bicycle routes and cycling. Is there anything in the absence of Commissioner Torrens to report?
So nothing beyond what I mentioned at the top of the meeting, which is we're going to be pushing out the transportation survey. We're actually going to do 2 rounds of that. So one we will be doing over the summer to try to capture as many year-round residents as we can, because we know the year-round residents may have different perceptions than our part-time residents. So we'll be starting to push that out over the summer, focusing on our in-person engagements, and then re-upping that in the fall with some new energy there once we have some more people coming back to town. We have gotten a lot of questions from council about this recently, so we're kind of sorting through all of our documentation and institutional memorandum on the staff side. So I would anticipate having something on the agenda in July, or we don't meet in August, right?
Nope.
September. Yeah, new commissioners, we don't meet in August. So having something on the agenda either for July and or September about that.
Okay, thank you. Water conservation. So the big topic, I think we just covered, so I won't say anything about that. It came up at the DWA board meeting in conjunction with their approval of the budget, which they did approve. 2 other relevant issues for DWA. You may have gotten a postcard about the water quality report that's now available. And also you may have gotten a notice about the public hearing. DWA has done a Prop 218 rate study, and that will come up for adoption on June 28th at 8 o'clock at the DWA headquarters on Gene Autry, and Zoom connectivity is available. So if you have any thoughts to the DWA board, that would be doing that. And once again, when the new commissioners are meeting, and I would recommend that one commissioner continue the role that I've had as liaison to DWA. They meet every other Tuesday, first and third Tuesdays at 8 o'clock. But the good news is that they now record the meetings and post them on the website, so they're on YouTube. So you do not have to get up at it. You don't have to be there, because you can do it on Zoom, which I've done. But also, if you're not available at 8 o'clock on the Tuesday morning, you can then catch it on the YouTube. So would recommend that. There's just a lot of cross-pollination, particularly now with the turf conversion between DWA and sustainability. And it's been a great pleasure attending those meetings. Wellness, interim Vice Chair Baker.
So as we said, the smoking issue has sort of, it's in no man's land, just waiting for city council to decide when and if they want to bring it up for debate.
Okay, well, hopefully you'll continue to at least be encourage that and be involved. in
Happy to
work.
speak for it whenever it gets on the agenda.
Great, thank you. All right, finally, Desert Community Energy Inland Regional Energy Network. A lot of things at the DCE level, two really interesting projects. One of which you probably have seen a lot of news about is that Coachella Valley Association of Governments is now looking at a potential project to create bridges at the Indian Canyon Wash between essentially the Desert Island Gateway State area and the train station, which are very frequently closed by either flooding water or even more recently all the sands. So these would be not temporary structures, but not a full bridge, but it's believed that from an engineering perspective, these would be quite helpful to solve most of the problem. There's a community survey that's gone out. It was in the Desert Sun. Don, I believe it probably went out via Denise or Amy Blaisdell, because I got it today, an email from the Indian Canyons Neighborhood Organization, which suggests that the neighborhood organizations are also spreading the word there. So would encourage you to respond on that. And while it's officially a CVAG project, we are looking at it from the Desert Community Energy side to potentially include solar shade structures on the right of way, which could potentially be a community solar project that could power some neighborhoods, such as the Desert Highland Gateway Estates area with a community solar project. So stay tuned. The applications are due. This is a state transportation commission grant. It is federal money, but it's being managed by the California Transportation Commission. Applications are due on July 31st. And the award, if it happens, would be in November. But very much an exciting project that we're all looking forward to there. And also, Commissioner Barrett has been very helpful because Desert Community Energy is currently doing a request for proposals to get additional renewable energy for our area. We are looking at a couple of potential projects within Palm Springs. I want to once again thank Commissioner Barrett for serving on the RFP Review Committee. That is a role that I previously had when I was chair of the Community Advisory Committee, and once again, did not know that that would be, a ticket to a day job. So Commissioner Barrett, not sure you're looking for a day job, but just
I'm a little old to go back to work.
yeah. But we are Commissioner Barrett along with Commissioner Baker, interim chair Baker. Your appointment to the Community Advisory Committee is not an ex officio position. So with your permission, we are getting additional staff, and we'd love to have you continue to serve on
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, so thank you very much. We've been facing challenges of getting staff and putting out various regulatory fires, which you can imagine with the CPUC and Energy Commission is just a lot of work. But we're staffing up. We'll be doing additional interviews for staff. So we are planning on bringing the CAC back together, and we are the budget will be approved at the next meeting on Tuesday, and we're looking for coming up with some community programs potentially in line with the Equitable Building Decarbonization Program and also the REACH code to help CARE and FERA recipients with some additional funds for that. So that's sort of the DCE sort of news on some of the projects, and Commissioner Barrett, you'll be continuing involved in those discussions, and thank you very much. I'll keep both of you involved. For the other commissioners, there are 5 slots open for the Palm Springs members of the Community Advisory Committee, and so in case either of you might be interested, it is not in any way a requirement for the Sustainability Commission to be on there, but if you or anybody that you know might be interested, we do have 1 vacancy in the on the commission, on the community advisory committee from Palm Springs. So that would be good there. On the Inland Regional Energy Network, in addition to attending the workshop with LP last week, there are 2 projects that we are applying with the Energy Commission and 3C-RAN and BayRAN. So Central Coast 3C-RAN is Ventura and Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo counties. So we're working them along with BayRAN, covering the Bay Area, on 2 applications with the California Energy Commission to the Department of Energy. One is for Solar App Plus, and so LP, thank you. That is something that IREN has sponsored for various cities to apply to the Energy Commission for a grant to facilitate Solar App Plus, which is software devised by the NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab, to facilitate solar planning, solar permitting. So thank you, LP, for working with that and working with them, the planning folks. So the grant, if awarded, would potentially expand Solar App Plus to include things like heat pumps and solar permitting on new buildings. For the moment, the app only supports retrofit solar permitting. So we're looking at that. And the other project with the DOE and Energy Commission is something called Code Cycle. And that's largely for non-residential buildings, to allow lighting technicians and other building professionals to have additional online tools to help them there. Today we had our first orientation in the CBAG area. So maybe for the benefit of the new commissioners, IREN Inland Regional Energy Network is a CPUC funded initiative that was approved in November of 2021 with nearly $67 million of total funds over the 6-year period, 22 through 27. We have 3 programs. One is Codes and Standards, which I largely lead, as well as public sector, to help our public buildings, i.e. City Hall, get more energy efficient. Things like community centers like, James O. Jesse or Demuth also would be eligible for that, fire stations, things like that. And also workforce education and training to train, sort of work with community colleges like COD and others to train, and even the schools K through 12 to train sort of a new generation of energy efficiency experts. So we had our initial training, orientation this morning for Blythe. Next up will be the 6 cities in the Edison area. So LP, I think that is being moved as we work on getting a little bit more staff, but we'll keep you posted there on that. And then LP, you and I had discussed getting a civic a fellow who could assist you on that. So there's a program funded by IREN that essentially would finance young folks who've just gotten out of school to do fellowships. So Civic Spark Fellows. So LP, happy to work with you on your application, and you saw my email of potentially kibitzing with Palm Desert to see if they would be interested in some of the other cities for for potentially a second one. So we're happy to talk about that. So more training will be announced as we finish our orientations, and LP, you'll hear a lot more about it. I'll work with probably our new team to make sure that you're involved, and obviously Christian should attend. We'll have the workshop most likely in the CVAG office in Palm Desert, the old one on Fred Waring. So there's room for everybody, lunches included. But the other matter is, once again, we'll be working on the cannabis ordinance, and I'll talk with you about separately on that one. And that's it for DCE and IREN. And LP, I'm happy to sort of, since I won't be doing these reports anymore, but if there are things that you might want to include maybe in the staff, my recommendation is, pending sort of, involvement and sort of there, you can just include that as a brief sort of staff report, and I can give you a little bit of heads up. And I know you attend the meetings for DCE. The next one, actually, if you're interested in going, for any of the commissioners, as well is the next one, our next monthly meeting will be at Palm Springs City Hall I believe at 3 o'clock, and the agenda should be posted tomorrow or Thursday at the latest. So next Tuesday at 3, a Zoom option is available, but in the large conference room. But everyone who are there, they of course are open to the public. Okay, that's it for me for DCE and Irene. And with that, let's go around the room for commissioner comments and upcoming agenda. And I will start perhaps with our new commissioners, then move to Commissioner Barrett, then interim Vice Chair Baker, parting thoughts, and then I'll have one final parting thought. So Commissioner Rotner, Commissioner Goebel, any thoughts there? This is sort of your time to what's on your mind, things you'd like to see on the agenda for agenda development.
I don't have anything off the top of my head. My head's swimming right now, actually. But I'm actually not going to be available, but I'm going to try and see if I can coordinate dialing in for the next meeting. But that's all I have for now.
Okay, Commissioner Goebel.
Very informative, and thank you, everyone. The same thing with me, LP. July, I looked at the calendar, I'm going to be up in the Bay Area, but I can zoom in, hopefully, not sure date, but I love what everybody's done in the past, and working with LP to see what we can do in the future, especially with the grass around the airport, City Hall, library, Park and Recs buildings. We're in the desert. So, but yeah, thank you, everyone.
Okay, Commissioner Barrett, as we turn the reins over likely to you in the next cycle.
What we're going to do in the next cycle is going to be try to figure out how to make up for where we've been in the past with a complete change in commission and new divisions and all these other sorts of things, but we'll do it in some way. I expect that we're probably going to be relying on David for various things over time because he has a level of knowledge of things which is just not easily transferred over. I'm not quite sure how we'll do all that. We'll do it somehow. I look forward to where we're going, and I would thank Carl and also the hidden Commissioner Torres for working together over the past couple of years. We've done some very interesting work, and I hope something happens with the smoking ordinance. Anyway.
Thank you. Last parting words from interim Vice Chair Baker.
Thank you, Chair. It's been a pleasure serving on this commission. I've been here almost as long as our esteemed chair, not quite, I think 2 years behind. And I think I'm moving on to another commission. I have an interview next week. So it's just keeps rolling on.
Yeah.
It's been a great pleasure working with the rest of you and especially with LP.
Thank you.
And Roy was on the call too. Thanks, Roy. It was a pleasure spending time.
Well, I will just have one or two more parting words. Everyone knows where to find me. LP, I assume that my city email address will no longer be valid after beginning on July 1. You can you can email me probably at my CBAG address. Given that there's substantial overlap of the CBAG duties there, I'll let Tom and Erica know that I'll be serving as a resource there, as I would for any of the other cities. And then I will conclude. Many of you know me, that I was a journalist before I became a lawyer, and then somehow turned into an energy expert. So I'm on my third or fourth career. So I'm just going to end with the famous words of Edward Morrow, who's CBS anchorman who was in London during the Blitz. Very good, I think, words for everybody. Good night and good luck.
Thank you, David.
All right. Thank you. And with that, I think my final word would be to adjourn the commission meeting at 7:25 p.m. And the next meeting is regularly scheduled for July. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and stay in touch.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.